This is the 9th class explaining the Mamar, the Hasidic discourse of the Lubavitcher Rebbe, Rabbi Menachem Mendel, that was given in 1986, which is called Bayom Ahu Yitaka B'Shofar Gadol, explaining the great shofar, which will be sounded by God in the days of the Moshiach, that will gather all the Jews to the holy mountain, to Jerusalem, to the third temple. And we described the work of Rosh HaShanna, how it is that nowadays we also sounded the shofar, and what exactly that the shofar does. As all of the other discourses in Chassidut, it explains that there is a deep reality, an inner reality, which is really a greater reality behind everything we do. Behind, first of all, the world. We don't see God creating the world. And even more so, behind the commandments. We don't see God reacting to the commandments. But the connection of the commandments and the effect that the commandments have on God's will, because God decided that's the way it was going to be when He made the world, and especially when He gave the Torah, is much, much deeper than anything we can possibly do in the world. And perhaps the ultimate commandment is the sounding of the shofar that we do on Rosh Hashanah. Rosh Hashanah is the day, we commemorate the day, the 6th day of creation, which in a few days will be 5,776 years ago, when the first man was created. And the first man, he declared that God is the creator of the world. This declaration is the same thing as what we do today as sounding the shofar, declaring that God is the creator of the universe. Now, what this has to do with the shofar that's going to be sounded in the days of the Moshiach, and why it has to be a big shofar, we haven't gotten to yet. That's what we're going to get to. But up to now, the Rebbe has explained that when the shofar is sounded, that because it is a commandment of God, as it arouses the essence of God's pleasure. And we explained that even though God, of course, has no form, and God creates the world constantly from nothing, every instant, if so, we don't really exist. We're really made from nothing. We're not made from atoms, and we're not made from energy. We're not made from spirit. We're made from nothing. In fact, energy and spirit and atoms are also made from nothing. But nevertheless, God created the world in such a way that we would be able to have an effect on Him if we used our action, speech, thought, emotions, intention, and free choice properly. So that's the idea of the sounding of the shofar. Sounding of the shofar, if we put all of our intention into it, is it has a very, very deep effect on the Creator, on the essence of the Creator. Because God gets a pleasure from light that comes out of darkness. And the Rebbe explained that this world is a very dark place, because only here can we not only not feel God, but we can, and deny God, we can even be sure, certain, that God doesn't exist. That's the feeling that everybody has. And to defy this feeling and to go through the veil of egotism and feel godliness is a big accomplishment. And that's exactly what happened on the first Rosh Hashanah. And especially now when the egotism is so thick and doubts and confusion are so great, as for sure the sounding of the shofar has a big effect. Now, the two things. First of all, the sounding of the shofar is built on the previous year, all the work we did in the previous year, and it also gives energy for the coming year. But in order that this should be done properly, as we have to have three elements which are expressed in the three blessings in the Musaf prayer of Rosh Hashanah, namely, we have to have Malchios, Zichronos, and Shofros. We bring 10 sentences from the Bible proving, so to speak, to God, forcing God's hand, that He said in the Bible that He was going to be a king. And we also have to accept Him as being a king. We have to accept God as our Creator and as our King, our ruler, and be devoted totally to him, as Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob were, without any thought of success, result, hoping that God will show us as soon as possible that he's a good God. But we believe that he is. Also, Zechronos, namely that we have to, the Zechronos means that we draw godliness down into the world, that God will remember the world, and Shofarot, that God listens to the Shofar. When we have these proper intentions, is that makes our Shofar sounding that we do on Rosh Hashanah very, very potent, very powerful, that a tremendous blessing comes into the world to affect the whole world, to make the world a better place. Because on every Rosh Hashanah, God, so to speak, takes inventory of the world, how the last year was and how the next year will be. So let's see what these Malchios, Zechronos, and Shofar are. Malchio, that which we said that God is a king. That has to be the intention inside of sounding the Shofar. Huin, and this is Tamlichuni Aleichem, make me rule on you. The Hakatara, that the coronation of the king. He al Yadei, the coronating God, this is by means of bittul, of surrender, atzum, tremendous surrender to God. Now, this is an idea which is not understood really properly, but what is bittul? The idea of bittul, it means doing what you're supposed to do. A person who plays baseball, he has to go according to the rules. The more he goes according to the rules and the more he fits in, so to speak, that's called bittul. The same thing, a person plays the piano. Bittul means doing what you're supposed to do in the best way. Isaac Newton came up with the principles of propulsion and gravity. Everyone has to go according to these principles. If you don't, if you decide you want to do it on your own, so you're not fitting in to the laws of nature. The same thing is, bittul means to fit in to the fact that God is creating you, and to feel this and to have love, how good God is. That's called bittul atzum, tremendous they call it self-negation, but it's really not self-negation, it's self-devotion. Ubiyachad zeh, together with this, mitoch simcha, it has to be tremendous joy. We're not talking about the type of bittul, of surrender that is in the Eastern religions, where a person just negates his personality totally. Exactly the opposite. To be very happy, to be a servant of God, and that we have the job to fix the world, to be very happy. To the point where it says that even Abraham, when he took his son Yitzchak to sacrifice him, which is the most difficult thing for any human being to do, especially a father like Abraham with a son like Yitzchak, that Avram, even though it was against every fiber of his being, but he did with tremendous joy because he didn't think about himself at all. That's called bittul, and doing it simcha, kamosh, like it says, the gilu barado, that we should be joyous in fear. That's called making God a king. Zichronos, this is Zichron Liyom Rishon. This is what we talked about before. If you look at the previous classes that we gave, that what we do on Rosh Hashanah is a Zichron. It adds on energy to the first day. Back then, the first Rosh Hashanah, 5,776 years ago. Hainusha al yedei avodah, that namely by means of our service of God, nase ilui, there is made an improvement more mikamo than it was, shahaya mikamo than shahaya it was, b'yom rishon, on the first day of creation, the first days of creation. Kaniskal, like we mentioned before, Barucha and long life. Ubaman, how do we do this? What really is the button that makes everything happen? The shofar. The shofar brings it into the physical world. It breaks through the spiritual and brings this revelation into the physical. Shebezeh nichlal, that then this is included. Hein amirat pesukim shofar. This is including also the saying of the sentences, the 10 sentences from the Bible that we bring to prove that God listens to a shofar, and also tikiyat shofar, also actually sounding the shofar b'pol. The kol shofar, that the sound of the shofar, who is called pashut, a simple blast, that screams out from the innerness of the heart. The Baal Shem Tov is a long mashal, example of a king's son that wanders far away from the father's house, and he comes back after years and forgets the language of his of the country, and he tries to get into the palace. He doesn't even remember it's the palace, and the guards are trying to knock him down and beat him. And suddenly he looks up and he sees his father, who has been looking for him, searching for him for 10, 15 years since he left, and he forgets the language, so he screams out to his father, "Ah!" And his father looks down and says, "Wow, that's my son." He hears the scream, and he realizes that this is his son. That's the same thing we're screaming out to God, Avinu Malkeinu, Avinu Ata, our Father, our King, you are our Father, Avinu Malkeinu. Kala Panimi, this is an inner voice. V'zeo, and this is Gam Masha Medayak, why it says B'maya, how, in Shofar, Betocha Shofar. That's what it says in the Mishnah. Bechinet Panimiyat Alev, the inside of the heart. Shemachnisim, Bekol, that we put into this voice of the Shofar, we put the innerness of our heart. And by means of drawing out the innerness of our heart, screaming out to God, please God, make the world a good place. V'kol kochat nefesh, and all the powers of our soul, v'ad l'maisa b'pol, until we actually do it and actually sound the shofar, b'gashmi. Al yedei zeh, by means of this, poalim, it causes, gam l'mayla, also above, sheyumshach b'chinat penimiyut, we will elicit from God the inner pleasure of God, the kol seder ishtalzut, and the whole entire chain of creation, the spiritual and the physical world. It all becomes worthwhile to God. Ad la'olam asiyah tachton, until this lowest physical world. It's like, imagine a person finds a child in the street and he brings him up, and the child was diseased, and he was crippled, and he was deaf, and he was blind. You spent hundreds and millions of dollars on him, doing operations and taking your time. And finally, in the end, he looks up at you and he says, thank you, right? It was all worth it for that. Right? You see that he cares about other people. He wants the world to be a good place. Oh, it was all worthwhile. The same thing happens with God and the Jewish people. God wants to see that the world is a worthwhile world. I'll just tell a small story that once somebody saved a child. The child was drowning. He jumped into the river and saved him and drew him out. And the child said, listen, I happen to be from a very rich family. I'll give you anything you want. What would you want me to give you? And he said, what I would like you to give me is make your life a life that was worth saving. In order to draw down godliness in to those people that totally went out of the picture. What about those people who don't know that they're Jews, that they don't care about that, they don't even know what God, they don't care about anything? This comes between two reasons. Because of the tremendous pleasures. Gashmim, sometimes people get so much pleasure out of not being a Jew, just acting normal, that it's not worthwhile to them. Their father did it, their grandfather, their great-grandfather, they don't know that they're Jews because of the pleasures of the world. Oh, lehipech, or maybe the opposite. Machmat, matzor, or matzok. Like the Jews in Russia, there was no education. You couldn't be a Jew, it was dangerous. That's what it means, will come. The lost people, Be'eretz Ashur, the lost people in the land of Ashur. Ashur means Assyria, or wherever it was, but Ashur also means rich. The lost people because of richness, because of success. Some people, because of success, God gives them success. They become so successful that they forget about God. V'hanidachim be'eretz Mitzrayim, and the people who are pushed away in the land of Egypt. Ashur means from tainug, pleasure. V'zewa ovdim, that's what it means, that people are lost, but Eretz Ashur, and the pleasure of success and physicality. Shamachmas riboy, in Yanim, the pika tanugim, because of the tremendous pleasures that they have, Gashmim, Nasim, V'yishman, Yeshoron, etc., as we'll explain next time.